Hey, I'm on the Hoff Time Report, and I'm actually coming to you from Orlando, Florida, where CPAC is meeting. And I think everybody's probably safely tucked away in their hotel rooms now, so we can go and do the Hoff Time Report. And I want to welcome our special guest this evening, Representative Dustin Manwaring. Representative, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks
It's a
for
little
taking
different
the
not
time.
having you here to talk
I
in
wish I
person.
were there. I really wish I was there, mainly because we haven't really had a lot of time to interact face to face. So we've kind of talked on the phone a little bit, really more than anything, and seeing each other in the hallways, but that's about it. So I'm a little disappointed that I can't be there with you right now.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it too.
Well, we'll have a nice conversation anyway. I have my first question though is, I know that there are a number of Manwarings in the southeastern part of the state, but where does that name come from? I don't even know. But where you what's your background, your family background?
I mean, the name comes from England. It's an English name. Um, my great grandparents, came to Utah, came out west, and then migrated north up into Idaho. Um, Many people might be familiar with the Manwaring Center, which was at Ricks College in Rexburg. It's obviously now BYU Idaho, um, but that's probably where the name really started spreading throughout Southeast Idaho because there was, 9 or 10 boys in that family, and so the family surname sort of spread out. So it's pretty common in the eastern side of the state. Um, yeah, anyway, English name, but been around Southeast Idaho for a few generations now.
Nice. Now, there's a candidate for, I think, lieutenant governor who's running named Manwaring. Also, you related?
I'm related to most of the Manwarings. I don't know who that is, but if it's somebody in Idaho or Utah, I mean, we usually can trace it back a few generations, but I don't think that's a close relation.
Okay, just curious. Anyway, let's talk about the legislature. How are things going for you so far this session? Surprises, disappointments?
It's going good. It's busy. I mean, we are right in the what I call the peak of legislative session. Um, so busy. I mean, these are long days right now. We're just grinding to get through policy and to keep up with all the amount of bills that are now turning out, and we're trying to get them through the process. Um, so overall, I mean, it's going good. Ask about surprises. I don't think anything's too surprising to me this session. It is an election cycle. Obviously, this year we have statewide races and all the legislative seats, of course. So there's always a little bit different feel in an election year versus an off election year. I mean, that's probably the only thing I would point to is really different this year.
You've only been in the legislature for a short time, relatively compared to other. This is your first or second session, first or second term. I don't remember.
Yeah, second term. So
Second term.
I was here from 16 to 18, and now I'm back again for a second term with a gap year in between. So I did not win re-election in 2018 in Pocatello. So I ran against the same candidate that held this seat and took the seat back this time.
What turned that around for you? What was the difference?
Pocatello's a purple district, and it has been for a long time. And when I was elected in 16, I'm pretty sure I was the first Republican to be elected in District 29 in the donut hole. I mean, obviously, you could go back to prior versions of what that district looked like, and there were Republicans earlier with a different map. But turnout is a big deal in a district like ours in Pocatello. So when I got elected, I came in the 16 cycle, which was a good one. It was a presidential year, and then when we have an off presidential year, sometimes the turnout's down, and we don't get as many Republicans out to vote, and so made it more difficult that second year.
And with the new map, what does that do for you? I mean, I understood that with the new map, it maybe makes that district a bit more conservative, perhaps, or a bit more Republican anyway.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think on paper you can maybe make that argument, but I think it comes down to who shows up to vote. They took out the most conservative precinct from our district, but they did add, over 4,000 new people on the other side of the interstate. If we get good Republican turnout, that does tend to make you believe that's the case, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, let's jump into some actual legislation. What's the bill do you think that is the most meaningful that has passed the legislature so far?
Well, the tax bill that we passed first is probably that's a huge impact to Idaho economically to bring down the tax rates. And obviously we're doing another rebate out and put more money back in the economy. So, I think that's a direct one into people's pocketbooks that's impactful. Several pieces of legislation obviously pending, but as far as the most impactful thing we've done so far and got it through the process was the first one this session.
How satisfied are you with that tax cut bill? I mean, when I talk to some of the other people who've come on the program, they've always that's usually the one they talked about that was, the one that they like talking to their constituents about the most. But when we kind of probe deeper on that legislation, there's sort of, I don't want to call it angst, but some regret that it wasn't more or that it wasn't targeted to other things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when I first heard that's kind of the angle we were going with that first one. As far as, where we thought there was potential to go between the House and Senate, I was not happy about doing another rebate initially. I didn't like that. And when I got my rebate check from the state of Idaho this last year, for $50 per person in the household, and it said courtesy of Brad Little, you kind of smile because we did it too, but that wasn't the point. The point was, a lot of people, for me, it was like, what's this? What's the effectiveness of this rebate? Does it really matter to people? And I heard from several people over the summer, $50 really. But the more I've thought about it and the more conversations I've had about that, it's a pretty effective way to get money back into the economy. People are going to go and spend that money, whether it's $50 or $150. So if you talk about ways to return money directly back to the people quickly and get it back into Idaho's economy, it's a pretty effective way. So, when I got over that, I'm in favor of lowering the individual and corporate tax rates. We did it last year from 6.95 to 6.5, and to bring that back down to finally get us somewhere competitive with the other states. We're going to be at 6% now with this one. I was in favor of that. So overall, in favor of it, with the caveat that hopefully we'll get some more tax relief this session on top of that.
What else are you looking for in terms of tax relief? If you had, I know you're not on the Revenue Tax Committee, but if you had your druthers and you had, some time to talk to some of your colleagues, which tax relief would you like to see next?
No, I'm on Rev and Tax. I'm actually pretty deep in the weeds on tax policy this year. I have several tax bills, and this year, what I like to see, I think we're going to have some property tax relief, and likely, and I know you've probably seen or heard, bits and pieces maybe so far, but we don't have a bill introduced yet. But there's at least a substantial likelihood of having some form of property tax relief taking effect if we can get a little bit of a raise on the sales tax.
I'm sorry about my getting your committee assignments wrong. I haven't had much sleep, so stick with me for a little bit. I actually had a very restless night, as I was telling the team earlier. So my bad. Hopefully, I don't make more mistakes as we go on. But I am interested in that the property tax bill. And I talked to Senator Jim Rice the other day, who's the chairman of the Senate Local Government Taxation Committee. I know you know that. I'm telling our viewers that. But he was indicating that raising the sales tax, and I guess there's some quibbling about what that number might be, somewhere in the high sevens, I guess, close to 8, and then removing a lot of the local property tax levy authority. Is that something that you're favorable to? Are there conditions that you would put on that kind of legislation, or where are you on that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on this, right? So I am amenable, or at least I'm interested to see if we can get there. And so the answer is yes. And I think what you've stated is, in the general range. Yeah, I don't know if it'll be quite up to 8%, but yeah, in the mid sevens, somewhere in that range is probably likely. Um, but I don't think it's, and the thing people have to understand is it's not going to completely remove property tax, right? I mean, what I think we're going to end up with is pulling pretty much everything off, but you're not going to get schools and bonds off of that. So probably looking in the 60 to 70% range for those that are homeowners and have a homeowners exemption. So it will be significant relief, but we probably ought to be clear from the beginning that this isn't going to completely eliminate all property taxes.
Is there some concern that, kind of like what happened in 2006, where the sales tax was raised from 5% to 6%, and the M&O levy came off of the property taxes, that this won't actually solve the problem? That it might for a short while, but maybe we'll just be back talking about property taxes again, as long as those entities still have the taxing authority.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, and I have the same suspicion, right? I mean, the thing is with sales taxes, it's much more dependent on the economy. Um, but I think the state has to live and die by how the economy is, and the locals can do that too. And if we go down this route, that will be more the case for them as well. And maybe it turns into that conversation later on, and how what we need to do for schools and levies. But I think we have to bite these things off in chunks. And so anything we can do, I think this would be a huge step in doing something for property tax relief and getting us away from that system. Um, and it'll be hypercritical. It'll be hyper criticized by some of those that thinks it only helps homeowners and it hurts people that rent homes or don't have ownership of their homes. And so there is components that I think will be in that bill when we get to it, right? So I suspect we will be probably talking about higher amounts of what's in the from what we've done on the grocery tax credit, and that raises a whole different issue with people that don't like the grocery tax credit versus repealing the tax altogether on groceries. So there's a myriad of issues there, but I think if we can bite it off in chunks and take a big swing this year at doing something for property tax relief that we can do at the state level, we should be doing it.
Uh, and when Senator Rice and I were talking the other day, he indicated that the talks were right now of raising the grocery tax credit by $60, if I remember. Does that sound right to you? $60?
Yeah, I mean that's the range that I've heard. I don't know if that's where we'll land with it, but that's the range I've heard, and I think it'll be likely in that range when at least the first bill's introduced.
Certainly more impressive than the $20 that passed the House recently.
Right. Absolutely.
But you voted for that. What is your take on the grocery tax? I know I've seen you vote against some of the motions, maybe all the motions. I don't know. There've been so many of them, to either call the bill out of committee or send it to general orders to add in the send a bill to general orders for the purpose of adding grocery tax. But I don't know that I've ever heard your take on that whole thing and why you voted against that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you go back to when I was in office before, we had this discussion in 16 and 17 or 17 and 18, but, and at that time, I remember, going through this, and it's been interesting to see the shifts and who is supporting it and who is not. But there was a fairly serious attempt in that cycle to repeal the grocery tax. And I remember, being pitched at the beginning that it was going to cost $80 million, and not know. And I was already pretty concerned at that time, not knowing, where the economy was going to go and the real cost and the impact. We were still arguing about, what happens, how do you define things that are not groceries? And I know we've come a long ways on that and with the SNAP list, and if that's the list you're going to use, I get all that. So I wasn't there. I wasn't sold before. I don't think enough work had been done on it before a few years ago. Um, I've reconsidered all that. I'm fairly receptive to getting there at some point. Um, I but I still am not there right now. I mean, in an order of priorities, I hope we can get to repealing the grocery tax sometime if we can get some other tax policy in order. Um, but I also think the cost from what I understand, and there's points to be argued about this. I understand, but that grocery tax credit has been working pretty well. And people, my concern with that is people see when they file their tax return, they know they're getting that back, and it's a refundable credit. And I get it. There's from the conservative side of our party, there's good criticism for that as a refundable credit, but people realize it and they're used to it. So I think it's going to be a significant change. And um, I just haven't been there yet on making sure that's the right thing to do. And it's a fair tax that everybody pays.
So, what makes you closer to it than before? If he sounds like you're not terribly sold on the idea.
Yeah, I guess what I'm telling you, and it sounds like I'm wavering a little bit, and I get that because I'm still chewing on this, right? I in principle, I don't want to be taxed on groceries. Um, so, but I want to make sure that it's working for everybody in our state, that this is the right time and the right way to go about it. So, um, I'm in favor of getting there eventually, and if we could do it this session, great. But it's become this such hot political football right now, in an election season. I just it's just not going to happen. In my opinion, it's not going to happen. And so to continue to say or to try and to go through the attempts that we've had to try to do it the way what we're seeing on the floor every single day, um, I just don't think that's an effective way to make policy. And that my
But
colleagues have their own opinion about that and the way they go about it, and I respect that, but that's just not the way that I think is the most effective way to repeal the tax on groceries.
fair enough. I'm just kind of wondering, though. The reason why that they're doing that is because they feel as if they can't get a hearing on their bill because the chairman of the committee won't hear the bill.
I understand that. I understand that, but I mean and we can talk about this process for an hour if you want to talk about it, but and what you understand it as well. But I mean, I think the effective way to get things done in the legislature is to go through the process, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
then there's ways to do that, and there's ways not to do that, and this this is not working right now.
I definitely appreciate that perspective. I'm just kind of wondering from a different view, though, as a member of the Reverend Tax Committee, if you or any of your colleagues are concerned that you don't get to debate in detail tax policy. You're basically just handed here's the tax cut bill for the year, or here's the policy change we want to make, and there's not a wide number of other alternatives presented to you in the committee, which seems kind of unusual. And I know you haven't been in the legislature for that long, but it's just based on my historical understanding of how the legislature operates. Is there concern about, maybe if only our committee had a chance to look at other options or other proposals, maybe have a debate on the grocery tax and have those objections and concerns and reasons for supporting it aired?
I don't think there's a lack of debate on the grocery tax. I mean, maybe in the tax committee, you're right, but I mean, legislators are talking about it, and that that process, as you know, is controlled by committee chairmen that decide what they want to have heard or not, and I think that process is there's fair criticisms of it, but it's worked for a long time. Um, So the proper process is to get enough support to get the committee chairman to hear it and to put that before the committee and have that debate. If that debate becomes before the committee, then I'm interested and ready to have it.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about on tax policy? I think we might have run that chicken into the ground. Chicken, horse, buffalo. I don't know. Animal. No.
No, I mean, I think what we're going to see is some other tax cuts this session, and again, I'm hopeful on this grocery tax issue that we can really figure out a way to go forward. And you've got to have the House and Senate and the executive branch on board with that. And if you don't have those three things, as you know, you don't get policy passed. And so
Who's the holdout on that? Because I recall the governor campaigning on repealing the grocery tax, and the Senate at one point passed the grocery tax bill. Actually, took out another tax policy and inserted the grocery tax repeal. This was a few years ago, and the House, of course, voted for that. Which entity, which body is the holdout, or which person, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the pressure would be on leadership and on the chairman of those respective committees. I mean, that's who really controls those gates. But and the other thing is when we have competing ideas there with the grocery tax credit, right? And so if that something like that gets legs, then it kind of cuts against putting something else like cutting the grocery tax out altogether at the same time. And so I don't have a specific answer for you, but I mean, the obvious answers are House and Senate leadership and the chairman of those respective committees.
Do you wish the chairman held a hearing on some of these controversial bills, or no?
I think we do but if you're talking again about the grocery tax credit in particular, I mean, that's one that we've kind of talked about over the last 20 minutes. Again, if it comes before us, I would look forward to having that debate, but we haven't had that in our committee.
Yeah, but I get that. I'm sorry. I told you I'd leave this topic, but I still am trying to figure this out. You are okay with somebody who's the committee chairman? Now, there's been some talk about this among your colleagues about how much power the committee chairman have, and some grousing about, a person who's been elected by the same number of people you have, essentially, or represents the same size district as you. Being able to have unilateral control over the agenda like that, to where you cannot debate the difference between repealing the grocery tax or raising the grocery tax credit or some other competing idea. But you, it sounds, are comfortable with that arrangement. You're comfortable with kind of having a gatekeeper. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. I like it. I mean, it's not a perfect system, but it works well. I mean, generally speaking, you have legislators that have been there longer and that understand the process. They know those hot button issues and those things that are going to be controversial in the committee and controversial for the party. And that process works pretty well, right? I mean, the committee's job is to really have those full discussions, and I get that. And the chairman's job is to be the gatekeeper even one step further. And so I get it. It can be incredibly frustrating when you have an idea that you don't feel like is getting heard, and sometimes you can go to a different committee and get things, move in a different direction. That's part of the legislative process, or playing politics a little bit. But I think it works. I think having a chairman and having leadership in that process, and again, those chairmen obviously are selected by the Speaker of the House, who we elect, and that's part of what goes along with selecting the Speaker, is who those chairmen are, and that sets up the whole process, and the type of, in a way, shapes the entire flavor of policy that you're getting. And so that's the system that we have, and we've had it for a long time, and I do like it.
You mentioned earlier, and I wanted to circle back to this, that you had some misgivings about the tax rebate that was given out last year, perhaps because of the size of it, and also because of the the governor taking credit essentially for the rebate. Do you still have that same misgiving? I understand you believe that it's an effective way to get the money back into the economy quickly, but do you still have misgivings about, particularly now it's an election year and everything, the governor sending out a tax rebate with his name at the bottom of it with a message that says, "Thanks to me, you get this tax rebate."
I mean, I've changed a little bit my perspective on that just because I've thought more about, what are better ways to get that money back. I mean, you can cut the rates, which we have, and you can do rebates are a pretty fast way to put that money back in the economy. So, I've come a little bit away from that. But I still, we've sort of joked about that check, and nothing critical about that necessarily, but I did get a chuckle about that when I opened up that envelope.
Okay, well, we got to get off tax policy because everyone wants to talk about other fun things, and there are a lot of fun things. There was a debate today, and I missed all of it, on House Bill 557. Was that today or was that yesterday? Anyway, it was recently, where there was the bill essentially was to impose some more regulations on lenders. You voted for that. The bill, I think, narrowly passed, or no, it failed. I guess, did it fail? Failed. What was that all about?
Who was
That's
the
on
sponsor of that bill?
was that Furness?
Oh, yeah, that sounds right. I think that one did fail.
What was the deal with that? I missed the debate, so that's why I'm asking sincerely. I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because he had a few right in a row and that was a day or two ago. He had a few right in a row. I can't remember Wayne on that one exactly.
Okay, I
think
just
he
missed
had,
it because
yeah.
I've been at CPAC and I just didn't get to see it, so I thought maybe you'd have some insight on it. That's okay. Not a huge bill. There was a kind of an interesting discussion I did get to watch the debate on, with regard to, this was a couple days ago, allowing the state of Idaho to participate in the expanded Powerball lottery. You'd voted for that. The bill passed this time. It didn't make it through committee last year. Tell me what your thinking is on that.
Well, we've had the Powerball for a while, right? And so we have a lottery in our state. So I was actually surprised when we had this issue last year, and we're either going to have the lottery and have the Powerball or not. You can decide with specific games to participate in or not, and whether that game is expanded to other countries. I don't think that makes a big difference on who plays it in Idaho. It doesn't change the odds. So to me, it turned into more of a debate about whether you support gambling or not altogether. And that's fine if that's your position. And I would be fine if we didn't have a lottery at all in Idaho, but that's where we're at. And now we're using those dollars to support things in Idaho. But that really is not fundamentally what this was about. This bill was about a specific game in Idaho.
It's an interesting discussion. This is more of a philosophical question, and it's the one that we've been kind of raising for a while, where the lottery has as its business model that people are going to can't afford to spend money on anything, let alone lottery tickets, so have to necessarily put their money in and lose in order to fund the system. And does that give you any pause at all?
If that were true, that gives me pause. But I guess I haven't seen that data. But I also, I don't think this Powerball bill was that. But some people may feel that way, and I guess that's fair. I just didn't see it that way.
Do you think that, uh, if you had a bill to repeal the lottery, would that be one that you would support, or is that maybe the argument then as well? It's in our Constitution.
Yeah, Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think we'd have to get over that hurdle. I mean, if you jump over those hurdles and you decide how, how are you going to fund the things in, permanent building fund and education and those things where that money's going now that have been relying on it. I mean,
Oh,
I
sure.
don't
I'm
know.
just asking your
That'd be
opinion,
an
though. I mean,
interesting policy discussion, but philosophically, um, I don't
it,
want to, have people be addicted to gambling and have a society where we're draining everybody dry that way. But I don't feel like we're there. I feel like we've adapted pretty well to it, but I also am, I don't want to have a system that every year it gets worse and worse and worse. And so I think it's something we need to continue to look at and to consider as serious policy.
do you think that, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like that wasn't part of the discussion that, and I know some legislators raised objections because of the moral implications of having a state-sponsored lottery, but it sounds like there's not a lot of discussion about, is this moral for the state to run a program that necessarily has to con poor people out of their paychecks?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the premise is you're conning people out of their paychecks, and I don't know. I don't know if that's really what's happening or not. I mean, I hope that's not the case.
I love it when we get later into the legislative session and there are like more bills to talk over, and some of these things like lottery. I doubt there's a lot of press coverage, so you don't really get a chance to hear individual legislators' opinions on it. And then there's also a bill that passed a few days ago as well that sets up a fund which has the state essentially subsidizing with some public money confined animal feeding operations. You voted for that. Tell us why.
Well, that was a little bit interesting for me, but I saw that as a bill where industry came together with government, and we're trying to solve a problem, and be treated actually by how some of the other water systems and access to improving water systems and waterways um, well, yeah, really how we're having clean water in our state ultimately. And so I saw it as an opportunity, and it was actually, if you're talking about the CAFOs, you're talking about dairy operations in particular, and um, ways for them to improve their operations and you know clean those up a little bit better. And so to me, it was like an industry. It was like the dairy industry coming up with a good solution, and ways to do that. And if you want to talk about the nuances of the way it worked, I you know I guess that there's fair criticisms there, but ultimately I thought this was something that was resolved within industry and would probably work well for them and put them on a level playing field to how other industries are being treated.
Are there other industries that get money from the state to work on water quality issues?
I thought there was. I mean, that's my understanding. The Department of Water Resources and some other, in the water, other areas of the law regarding water, I believe that's true. So, and I think this had to be associated with water, at least some sort of water, right? Like water systems and what um, or wastewater, or the cleanliness of water altogether. And so I think that was the connection between dairies in particular and this legislation.
There is a water quality, a water pollution control fund. I don't remember the source of the revenue for it, but I think it's used to remediate um, uh, gas tank problems. Does that sound right? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that.
I was just kind of taken by the idea that an industry can show up and request money from the public for their water projects or their confined animal feeding operations, and some smaller industry that probably has the same kind of issues generally cannot. Is there a concern about like a special interest coming to the Capitol and saying, give us $25 million to work on our issues?
I mean, there's a fair criticism there, I think, Wayne, but special interest. I mean, dairy interest is a special interest, of course. It's a huge one to the state of Idaho, and it's a huge one that has an environmental impact on our state. So when you're talking about interest to pay attention to, I think I think it is an important one, but so are the little ones. So I think anytime I don't want to shouldn't be ignoring the little guy, but this is an incredible industry to our state. So I think that's to dismiss that and anything otherwise, I think would be a little bit ignorant.
So I mean, if like I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's parallel. But if, let's say, the oil change businesses come to you and say, we've got a problem because we're collecting all this used oil, give us $5 million to help do a better job disposing of it. Would that be the same thing, and you'd view that favorably? I mean, that's hypothetical, but or is it because of the industry, because of the size of the industry? In this case, the dairy industry in Idaho is the fourth largest dairy industry in the country, so we understand the scope of it. But I'm just trying to get a sense as to, okay, I voted for this because it was the dairy industry, or I voted for it because they were working on a water quality situation.
Water quality, but I mean, your question was, maybe did I pay more attention? Or at least I thought that was what it was sort of aimed at, was did I pay more attention or give it more favorability because it was the dairy industry? I was just acknowledging, the importance of the dairy industry in our state. But no, I mean, I think I'm looking at it as of the effectiveness to the state in general, right? And so, what are the impacts if a small oil company comes and they need help cleaning up our state or cleaning up something that is impactful to the state, then I'll be paying attention to that.
Is it appropriate for a taxpayer who's not in the dairy industry to say, wait a minute, I'm having my own problems dealing with, government regulations or other issues in my day-to-day operations. Why should I have to pay for their issues?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair.
But not enough for you to have voted no on it. So I guess it's a concern, but not a bigger one, I guess.
Well, uh, I mean, you're talking about, I mean, so who are you talking about that showed up and made that criticism? Because
Oh,
I
I
don't.
mean, just what taxpayers tend to do when they hear that that they're subsidizing somebody else's program. Let's say I have a payroll processing business, and it's very expensive, and I have a lot of things on my P&L that I wish I could, get some state or federal help to deal with, and I don't have the power or influence to go to the legislature and get that. I can't ask for $5 million, let alone $25 million.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know I don't know the question you're asking really there.
Let's say I'm a tire business and I have to dispose of tires.
Yeah.
Should the tire business be concerned that he or she is having to subsidize the doings of the dairy industry because they had the ability to go and the audacity to go to the legislature and ask for 25 million, when I have to go dispose of my own tires? I guess, is that a fair? You understand what I'm saying there?
I guess I don't see the causal connection between those two things. I don't see that the tire industry's paying for the dairies, but if you make that connection, maybe I can answer the question a little bit
Well,
differently.
I mean,
I don't
my
get what you're
tax
asking.
goes my tax goes to the government, and then so I pay my taxes, and then that tax gets to be used by somebody else who didn't earn it to deal with their own problems. It's from those who are able to, giving to those who are not able to, I guess.
Yeah,
From
yeah, I think that would be a concern.
Okay. Um, but not enough to vote against the bill. I don't want to belabor it, but it is the nature. I mean, it's kind of an interesting topic because that's the nature of taxes. I earn money, and then the
Well, hang on,
government
Wade.
takes.
Do you know where the money came from for that bill?
Tell me.
No, that's what I'm wondering. I'm asking you so we can have a conversation about that because until we not know where the money came from for that bill, we're just presuming this is every taxpayer in Idaho is paying for it.
Well, I mean, that's probably one of the ARPA bills, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it's been funded yet, right? I mean, I think the bill we voted on, if I remember correctly, and we can go check it or pull it up, obviously, if you want to have this conversation still, but
Yeah.
I think it's creating the opportunity to put money in it. And so we're already, we're talking about where the money's coming from without having the money come from any particular place yet on a specific bill. Right. So
Right.
that's why I'm struggling to answer your question because you want an answer about that specific bill and it doesn't
Well, I mean,
work
so
that way.
the money, yeah, and I honestly don't remember. I'll look right now. But the money either comes from ARPA or that's the federal
Right.
grant money for those of you who don't know. I know you know. But or it comes from the general fund. It comes from one of those two places. And either way, that is public money that somebody either paid in or was printed magically in Washington D.C., which has to be paid back by our kids and grandkids. So it should naturally concern those people who are obligated for that money. I got to find it now.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I totally agree with the fact that we're adding to the national debt and the cause for concern there. But when the specifics from that ARPA money, we have specific limitations on how to use some of those dollars, right? So we're looking for qualifying projects and ways to put those dollars to use in our state. And so this may be one of those uses in the environmental area for water cleanup or improving our water systems in our state.
So the idea then is that you're finding there's a public benefit that naturally falls into um, the mandate to go spend that money. I guess did I say that correctly? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I
No,
okay.
I mean, I get where you're going with that, but the way I would say it is we've accepted these dollars, and there's specific ways we can use them, or they just go back, they revert, right? And that's fine. I mean, you can argue whether we should do that or not, but if we're gonna use the dollars, you have to use them in a specific way. And so, how are we going to use them? And that would be a potential way to use the ARPA dollars effectively in Idaho.
Okay, let's move on. How about House Bill 589, which passed the other day? You voted for, which gives Rule of 80 to juvenile corrections staff.
That just was in committee, Juvenile Rules Committee yesterday. So
Oh, my thing says it passed.
that was in Juvenile Rules last night. The Rule of 80 you're talking about the 9-1? Oh, never mind. There's two different bills.
Yeah,
So
the juvenile
there's a
corrections
Rule of
officer.
80 for the dispatchers was last
Yeah.
night in Juvenile Rules. So the other staff, you're correct.
I'm just trying to figure that whole thing out because what I understood, and maybe the feeling on it has changed. So the Rule of 80, for those of you who don't know, basically gives the public employee a chance to add their age to their length of service. And at that time when those come together to equal 80, you get to retire. And for folks who start when they're very young, let's say you're 20 years old and you have start when you're 20 and you have 30 years of service, you end up being able to retire when you're 50. But I always thought that when those kinds of policies were first put in place, that it was basically for frontline people whose lives were in danger on a day-to-day basis. And that's why I was really surprised by the 589 bill that just passed the House. And then I didn't really know that there was another bill for I guess I did, for the dispatchers, you said, right?
Right. The
So what?
911 dispatchers.
Yeah. So what's the thinking on that? Has the policy shifted towards um, providing that benefit to people who aren't frontline people? And how far does it go?
I'm not sure it's shifted. I think that debate's pretty lively. It's hard to draw that line. And I think you're right about the intent and where this came from. And I mean, I listened to that. I happened to be in committee on a different bill yesterday, so I listened to most all of that testimony on the 911 and bill at least. But um, really, I think this came from trying to protect against those in physical danger, and that when you add up the years of service and your age and your job, because of that strenuous labor and stress, right? And that's where that stress now has been kind of shifted to maybe include things that are not necessarily physical stress, but emotional and mental trauma that can happen in those jobs that maybe it's appropriate to talk about that, whether but one thing I thought was interesting though, that came up in the discussion, and I don't know, we're getting away a little bit from juvenile corrections or the specific bill you asked about, but it's the same thing on the rule of 80 with the dispatchers. One thing that came up in that hearing yesterday afternoon in the Jude and Rules Committee, um, was that there's just not very many of those people that are getting to the rule of 90 anyways, or even 80. There's not very many of them that are putting in that many years of service. They're literally working a couple of years and leaving. And so the debate sort of turned into, um, maybe this is just a better, this is an incentive to get them to work longer. They're never really going to make it to that retirement. And I thought that was an interesting turn and twist that I didn't expect. And it sort of was an argument to make the rule change, not because they'll really get to that and retire with it, but it'll keep them and incentivize them to stay around a little bit longer because they're struggling to find people to fill those roles.
I'd never heard that argument before. That's really interesting. But is there something to be said about the fact that the government has the ability to offer this incentive, but the private sector can't even come close? I mean, you're offering people, hey, you can retire, but by the time you're 50, and the other, no one else in the industry and in the private sector can come even close to something like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there are certain roles that government has. I mean, we obviously government provides police and emergency services, and that's just a fact. The government provides those services. So the philosophical debate about that is true. I mean, there's probably lots of other areas we can talk about, the state insurance plan and things like that are very similar to try to compare to, can private enterprise compete. But on the other hand, government the government that we have and the government services that we provide, sometimes it's incredibly difficult to fill those roles that we have the obligation to do, because we can't compete with private business and what they're offering. So I think that's a two-way street if you pick your issue. Um, but
It's a very challenging topic because I've always said that you're in the legislature, you're representing the taxpayers, but at the same time you have this need to have employees. As long as you're going to have employees, then naturally you're going to discuss a competitive pay and benefits package for those folks. It's just one of those. It's a question of how far you can go. The same thing came up, I think, on the health insurance for the school teachers. The bill, I'm pretty sure you voted for it. That allowed for school districts to put their employees on the state in health insurance plan, and there was some discussion about, okay, yeah, that's good for them, but they have a health insurance plan with premiums and deductibles that people in the private sector just can't really find.
yeah, well, I mean, we know what the plan is because it's the state health insurance plan. And so I mean, it's good. I mean, it's a good plan. I mean, the unfortunate thing is that we're in a situation where there's a lot of terrible health insurance plans out there, and it's I mean, that really should be where the discussion is focused, not that this one's a good one. That there's a lot of terrible ones out there, and what's created that, and why are health premiums, health costs for everybody's out-of-pocket health costs going up every year, becoming an ever increasing part of their budget, their family budget every year. But the issue in particular with schools, I do believe it was a real problem that needed to be resolved, or at least we should have tried to do something in this area to help. I mean, when I first started knocking doors in Pocatello back in 15 and 16, it's consistently come up as the issue at the top of the list for teachers, and the reason they weren't staying, and the reason they were leaving teaching and going and finding other jobs, and that they were just like, we cannot afford to pay our monthly premiums for insurance. Like, it's so expensive. And that was just one of those repeated things that I consistently heard.
Is there a worry that some of your constituents would look at that and go, okay, well, you solved that problem for them, but I still have my problem of, $500 a month $500 a month premiums, and, $5,000 deductibles?
Yep. Yeah, I think it is that, and that's back to what I was trying to say originally, is how do we fix the bigger problem of the cost of health insurance that keeps going up year after year after year? And when you're talking about health insurance and the cost of childcare, I mean, those two things literally alone continue to just outpace. Frankly, they're just probably outpacing inflation. Maybe inflation now's giving it a run for its money, but generally speaking, those things have outpaced inflation.
Yeah. Maybe finally it's catching up, and the insurers can say, "Hey, look, we matched inflation for the first time in 20 years." Wouldn't that be interesting? Okay. I wanted to ask about a couple other things, and we'll let you get home for the evening. But the first is last legislative session. I've asked other legislators this too, so maybe you're ready for this. But last legislative session, the legislature said to the universities, U of I, ISU, and Boise State, you guys need to do something about these social justice programs. You all have them on your campuses. You're cutting $2.5 million from those programs. And the colleges and universities did not do anything in response to that. They did no programs have been cut. The programs that existed before are still in existence. What do you guys do about that?
I don't know. I mean, I think the university's got the message, but I have a university in my district. Idaho State's in the district, and I saw a list that was put out of supposed classes at ISU that taught critical race theory, whatever. That debate turned into a political football, right? And I know people can provide evidence of critical race theory in Idaho, and people say it's a bunch of nonsense and it doesn't happen. I don't think we need to get into that debate. I think those universities were put on notice and took the message loud and clear that they need to be a place, and we all need to hold them accountable. They need to be a place of ideas from every political perspective, and honor that, and that's what I expect from our universities and in our education system in our state.
If they got the message, then why are all the same programs that were in existence before still in existence?
Because there's a dispute whether those are critical race theory programs. At least that's what I believe, right? I mean, that's the question. I don't think that debate's been resolved. I mean, you might think they are, and then the guy sitting next to you doesn't think they are. So,
well, I mean, and it's not just critical race theory, it's the social justice agenda generally, which includes, the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, which includes things like the Gender Resource Center on the campus of Idaho State University.
Yeah, well, you can criticize things like that, and if that's really social justice. Have you been to the Gender Resource Center?
I've only been to their website.
What does it say they do?
Let me look it up.
Because I haven't been to the gender resource center, but I
It's
think any one of these we need to take if we're gonna you gotta go down the rabbit hole a little bit and see what
yeah.
is really going on there.
The Gender Resource Center its focus is to provide education and programs to students, staff, and faculty, to provide a space to explore the ways gender and sexuality impact our lives and interactions with others and the world we live in.
Okay.
I mean,
How is that? How is that putting a spin on it? I'm
here,
just
here,
asking the question. I don't
yeah,
know
yeah, no,
exactly what.
that's
Yeah.
fair. That here are the LGBTQ resources this is from the Gender Resource Center webpage. LGBTQ resources. Yeah, here's a place. Oh my gosh. They've got the Anderson Gender Resource Center located on the university campuses, which provides resource for gender and sexuality issues on campus. The
Where are
Diversity
you
Research.
where is this at?
This is on the Idaho State University website. Yeah, this is the first time I'm seeing it too. So we're looking at this together. Diversity
I'm not
Resource
looking
Center.
at it. I'm just listening to you.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, no. I'm looking. You're listening. That's fine. Diversity Resource Center creates and promotes diversity programs and education for students, and is open for everyone of all backgrounds. Sexuality and Gender Alliance, also at ISU. I won't read all the descriptions. ISU Counseling and Testing Center, which provides free counseling, is available to students dealing with a variety of concerns, including gender identity and sexual orientation support. This sounds very, very woke, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And I think when you're talking about liberal arts in general and liberal arts college, I'm a little ways removed from that. Maybe it doesn't seem like I am removed from that, but even when I was in undergrad,
Yeah.
I got tastes and flavors of that. I never felt like it was pressed upon me, but it seemed like it was more and more all around. Um,
No, sure, but they
yeah,
didn't. How long ago was that, by the way? I don't know how old you are.
yeah, 41.
Okay, yeah,
So
I had you at least 21, so you're doing well. I mean, but you didn't have back then an office of equity and inclusion, and I mean, this is all this is on the campuses of ISU, U of I, and BSU, and no one's ever voted on this. No one ever said, "Oh my gosh, you know what? We need more than anything on ISU's campus. We need two offices devoted to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and three to deal with gender issues and sexuality issues." I don't know. It
yeah.
seems strange. And in 2020, the legislature said, "Okay, you guys get back to your core mission and reduce some of this administrative bloat." And everybody knew exactly what they were talking about. And then in 2021, because they didn't do anything, that's where the legislature said, "Okay, guys, now we're going to give you a dollar amount, $2.5 million. Cut these from your schools, 500,000 each at U of I and ISU, and 1.5 million at Boise State." And they didn't do anything with that either. So that's why the question is why what will you guys do next? Are you just going to pass a budget and call it a day, or are you guys going to hold these guys accountable?
Well, I think the universities should be held accountable, and they are accountable. Uh, if the process isn't working, I don't think as a legislature, we can go in and say every single year and go through their coursework and say, you can do this, you can't do that. We need to have the university system working, and the management, the trustees, the board of trustees working to keep control of that. Um, so when it gets too far out of line, yeah, I think you can send the message with appropriations, um, but to year after year go in and look at and say you can do this or you can't do that from a policy side, I don't think that's our proper role.
Well, I mean, you control the purse strings,
Correct.
so shouldn't you say? I mean, couldn't you object to the very existence of a program by voting no on a budget? Not just for universities, but for any other thing that you might.
Yeah, you could, and sometimes that's an effective way to send the message. You know, it has been used that way in the past, um, but
Oh, it
eventually,
has.
I mean,
It has.
yeah, and eventually you've got to come up with a solution, and usually sending, if you kill a budget on the floor, sometimes that has worked. You go back and figure out, and maybe change policy, but usually you're cutting the budget, and they're maybe fixing the problem, and you hope they fix the problem. So yeah, I mean, I think it can work. Whether it always works, I don't know if that's true.
I know the issue hasn't come up, and JFAC hasn't even set the budget for the colleges and universities yet. They will in a few days. But I'm just wondering if a bill comes along that just funds the universities as normal, that you know, and pretends as if last year never happened. Does that sit well with you?
Well, as pretends that last year never happens. I mean, you're sort of, again, you're taking the premise that all this stuff is happening, and I haven't seen it. I've seen people argue that it is, but I haven't seen it. Right. So
I'll
that's the
I'll
problem
I'll,
I'm having getting there.
I'll send you a link to the information on the Gender Resource Center and the Office of Equity and Inclusion and the LGBTQ resources that are on the University of Idaho's. I'm sorry, on the Idaho State University's webpage,
Yeah.
so you can take a look at it.
Yeah.
But let's go to unless you wanted to add anything else on that. I was going to go to a different topic.
No, different topics. Good.
One more thing. So you're working on a bill dealing with digital assets, and that's a passion of mine. Tell me a little about that.
I thought we were going to talk about that for an hour, and you saved it for the
Did you
last
think we were
minute.
going to just talk about that? No, sorry, buddy. No, but I do want to talk about it. So
I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah, it's exciting that you've got that. But tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, it's an area I'm passionate about as well. I mean, I've been in this and paid attention to digital assets and different forms, cryptocurrency and things for a decade now. And and I have clients that are in the technology space, and have had some actually that have now been involved in some of the mining space. So, it's something that I paid attention to personally and took an interest in, and just decided, a few years, at least for a few years now, I've been looking at, what states are going to be doing with regarding policy in these areas. And so, um, that's a little bit of the background of why I have the interest. But, right
What,
now, or go ahead.
what does your bill do?
So this bill defines digital assets in our state, what a digital asset is, and then it also defines how to have a possessory interest, so a security interest. If you hold a digital asset, you have a possessory security interest in that digital asset. And then the last step it does is defines that, it basically defines virtual currency. So something like, obviously, there's many different types of virtual currency. You're well aware of this, but basically says you can use it. You can use it like cash. So um, it would get that treatment under the law. As if someone's using it as currency, then that's what it can be used for, just like cash is used for that.
Why is that necessary? Because I could potentially do that now without needing the legislature's buy-in on it. So what was the purpose of that bill? What does it
There's a
do?
few. Well, there's a lot of purposes, but for me, a couple of important ones. I want to make sure that digital assets are protected, that it's a private property right in Idaho. I don't want to be in a situation, and we can talk about what happened up in Canada, and where government's now interfering in some of the either exchanges, or trying to cut off lines with banks and institutions. So I think it's important that we define what a digital asset is in state law. And so we can say it's your personal property. Um, and then we can start enabling commercial transactions as well, right? So that would be, who can custody those digital assets, and hopefully get to a point where we can define, ways to to make sure we're enabling commerce between not just traditional financial institutions, that could custody this stuff and protect it and hold your security tokens if you want, but also just peer-to-peer transactions. So enabling commercial transactions under the law, if people want to participate in that, obviously it's not something that people have to do, but if financial institutions and individuals want, or just peer-to-peer want to go into a security arrangement and give a loan for something that's a digital asset, you could do so, and how to protect your security interest under the law by recording that security interest. So that's just one use case, or it could potentially be a huge use case if people start doing that. And I have a couple of examples of that, where I've tried to do that myself. But secondly, if we don't define it under the law, we're running in. I anticipate running more and more often into issues in divorce proceedings where you're dividing property, and we don't know what a digital asset is. Is it really personal property? What is it in our state? In bankruptcies, so those are those are the initial concerns that I have, and that we're doing something. But I also think that we can take a lot of different angles here if we start building some good policy in this area, including, there's new forms of companies, those digital asset organizations. It's kind of the new form of the LLC. It's completely, built upon blockchain.
Decentralized autonomous organizations you're talking about.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, sometimes I use an acronym, and probably need to explain that. I knew you would know what I was talking about, but digital asset organization is what a DAO stands for. And
Right.
so it's hard to build those things in when you haven't defined anything related to digital property or digital assets in the code anywhere.
But you didn't go that step, and it's pretty benign in its handling. It basically just defines what it is, but it doesn't say things like digital assets are non-confiscatable, intangible personal property that I don't know how you would describe, but anyway, that you didn't so much you didn't go so far as to you know, protect it from government seizure as they did in Canada, which you just described, or go into let's go and define what did you define a DAO? I don't remember that you did.
No, we did not define a DAO yet. Because
But
I
I mean,
think I guess you could have, but that would have been a little bit awkward. I think in this statute initially, because we're just dealing with digital assets in particular. But
it almost seems like this is just a placeholder for something else in the future that you're kind of right now we're just going to define it, and then later on we're going to maybe come back and do something else with it. Am I wrong
uh,
or
no, that's fair. I mean, and we're trying to get started, right? So and I know you didn't like those two bills we introduced last year, but they were modeled off of Wyoming. They're almost
oh
verbatim what Wyoming
yeah,
had done.
I know, and that's the thing that really frustrates me is that, and I may help me out because I really want to hear your perspective on this because my deal on Wyoming when I talk to people about that I always say, isn't it kind of strange that all these currency advocates who are basically libertarian were going out and asking the government to regulate cryptocurrencies. It's essentially what they did in Wyoming, and the answer is, yeah, but we just kind of wanted to get some framework on the books somewhere, and this is the first state, and that's very exciting to us. Is that? I mean. Is that your sense too? That it was. I mean, why do we have to go regulate it in order to express our love of something?
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't think that's Wyoming's intent to regulate it. I think every state's taken a little bit of a different angle on what they're doing here. And Wyoming
Well,
passed.
they did not regulate it.
Um, well, Wyoming's done a lot of things now, but really, what the angle that I saw that they were taking is trying to get to a point where they were having a state sanctioned banking system, right? A state chart, a new form of charter or a special purpose depository institution in Wyoming that could cater to the industry, that could cater to all these different uh, cryptocurrency businesses that are set up, and sort of be the new on and off road and provide direct access to the Fed. That's really controlled by a few big three banks that only have that direct Fed access. And so they were going to sort of trying to stand up a system that was kind of the business to business entity, or business to business banking entity, um, that really no state bank had done before. And I think they're still working on doing that. And they've done they've obviously pushed forward and done a lot with the digital asset organizations. And they've also stood up. They just started a new chancery court, a new business court in their state that can deal with some of these issues that are going to start, what happens when a DAO sues a DAO. I mean, these are completely new, crazy concepts. But Wyoming's trying to set itself up to be sort of the Delaware. I call it the Delaware of the new business entities or new business organizations in this space, and that they're hoping that they can attract companies to relocate there and invest there, or even not relocate, but if they have their digital assets stored, or all their clients or customers is in a bank in Wyoming, and they're getting a small fee, or they're processing those disputes, and they're doing it better than other states. I mean, that is one objective that I've seen them take on there.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. I was just I thought, okay, here's a new and novel industry that's just getting started. And right out the gate, in order to embrace the new novel industry, we go and figure out ways of regulating it, as opposed to coming up with sort of the anti-regulation, where we say we're the state that we're not going to get in your hair. And I guess I also understand that there's the banking regulations are a little different than some others, as it applies to some of the federal treasury requirements. So I get that it's a difficult needle to thread, but dang it, I just sort of really wish that they had threaded a little differently, I guess.
Yeah, well, and we could talk about this for hours. I mean, I think you could pick out pieces that you could call regulatory, but my interest, and we can get back to Idaho in particular, I don't want to regulate. I mean, and I said this in committee when we just debated the bill this week. I am pretty hypersensitive to the government getting involved in personal property, and it's exactly the opposite for me. I mean, I do not want, particularly in an environment, and we talked about inflation briefly, right? Particularly in an environment where we're seeing the federal debt inflate to what it is. We're seeing inflation and the dollar being worth less and less every day. People have to find a place where they can invest and have a return on their investment, and know that they can transact business. And government's job is to protect that right, not get in the middle of it and interfere or take it away. And so my objective is to put that in place, to build upon it, and make sure we're doing it right in Idaho.
Well, I don't know that I'm going to object too much to a bill that merely put some definitions in place. Last year we had some issues with the version where it was a regulatory setup, but this one I don't know that I'm terribly excited or.
Well, and the only thing, not I don't want to cut you off. I just want to make sure before I forget, really, to make sure that I'm clarifying. The only thing regulatory in that bill that I remember last year is that it allowed banks, the part of it that allowed banks to custody digital assets, it allowed the Department of Finance to have regulatory oversight over that.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
you remember
Yeah.
it correctly. We had an objection
Yeah.
to the expansion of the role of the Department of Finance and to some of the fees that were in there and so on. So yeah, I mean, it's just a different viewpoint of how to handle it is all, and so now you're at this place where you're defining it. okay, that's fine. Where you go next is it really matters, just because I think that there are states that are going to get this, that are in a position to get this really, really wrong. And we're in a position to get it really, really right. And so that's all. I'm just hoping we'll be able to
Yeah,
get to a
and I
place.
know you have an interest in it, and I think we need all hands on deck on this
Yeah,
issue, right? And so
love to
I
work
think
with you on it.
yeah, I mean, we need everybody that can to keep focusing on and providing suggestions and bringing ideas that, what are the steps we need to be taking, because it is an important one. And I think for the next, well, foreseeable future, we're going to have policy discussions and issues on this that need to be resolved. And it'd be great to be leaders and to be doing it right. And
Do,
so,
do, do you think we can get the legislature moving in the direction of getting Bitcoin on the balance sheet soon?
uh, yeah, when Ron Nate had that bill for gold and silver bullion to be able to have the state treasurer invest in that, I took a copy of that, and I, I I drew on it a little circle and put the B with the money sign on it, and I took it over and I said, "Hey, I fixed your bill." Got a kick out of it. So the answer is, I mean, I would love to get that to that point, but the pragmatist in me, I mean, we're not ready for that, right? I think it'd be a mistake to walk in and say, let's put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Now, do I think that would be awesome? Absolutely. I mean, and from a personal level and even from a state interest level, I think that would be great. But I mean, the conversations I'm having on trying to just get people to understand any form of what a digital asset is, what a virtual currency is, and what Bitcoin is, and how it works, and how it's safe. And I mean, these are long. This is taking a long time. The education process is long, right? I mean, we still have members in our body that don't are suspicious of using a debit card. So the learning curve here is steep.
Which ones are those?
I wouldn't
just
do
just
that.
kid-
I wouldn't. I
just
wouldn't
just
do that. Yeah.
just teasing, just teasing. Is there some value to maybe getting the legislature to say, "Hey, state treasurer, why don't you study this over the summer and get back to us in January 23?"
Sure. I mean, I think everybody should be studying it. I mean, I think that everybody possible should be taking it serious and putting in the time and effort. I saw a report. I don't know where it came from or how authentic it was, but basically, it takes an average person about 9 hours to even begin to really understand Bitcoin to the point that they could explain it to somebody else and really understand it. I mean, that's a significant amount of time for someone to invest, and to take an interest in, and everybody will, at least I think they will eventually start to have
You're
to
you're
do that.
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's a really important. You're absolutely correct. It's a very, very important topic, and I think people really need to understand it, especially as they grapple with inflation. I mean, at least I tell everybody, you can't knock on the headquarters of Bitcoin, arrest the CEO, and order him to print, 21 million more Bitcoin. It just doesn't work, and that's the beauty of it. And there's you can't topple a government. You can, I mean, it's just a fantastic technology, and maybe what you could do is you could have a bill that says whenever a player goes into the quick mart for a Powerball ticket, they instead get a Bitcoin. They're not a Bitcoin, but they get a part of a Bitcoin and a ledger.
I
It,
like
it
it.
would be a better. It would be a better deal for them. You know that, right?
Yeah, it would be a
It'd
better
be much
deal.
much better deal.
That is truth right there.
Anything else on your mind? Any other topics you're working on?
Um, I mean, I'm just going to keep working on tax policy this year in particular. I mean, we talked about it at the very beginning when we started having this conversation tonight about what we can do with property taxes and the sales tax. So working on that, I really am hopeful we'll get something going there before we get out of here this session. Um, we'll see if we can get this Digital Assets Act through the Senate. And I know we have a governor that has been suspicious of it, so that's another challenge in and of itself. And that's sort of why we're trying to just start somewhere so we can start educating our body and getting some of this done going forward.
The governor suspicious of it? Really?
Well, I think it's fair. I think maybe that's just and I don't want to speak for him. I'm not trying to talk negatively about that. But I maybe it's just generational too, right? But um, I hope we resolve some of the concerns there, and that we can get something in front of them. The bill we have is not scary and just helps. We can start building upon that.
The lieutenant governor has embraced Bitcoin.
I saw that like a week ago or so. It sort of was going on social media, and then I saw a picture where she had a book in her hand, and it was
The Bitcoin
something like
standard. Yeah.
that.
Who
Yeah.
who else who else in the body is? I know Peter Riggs is working on this. Who else is really out there championing this issue?
Um, there's not a lot of champions for this issue. I mean, I know there's conversation. I mean, in the House side, Senate or Representative Dixon has been helpful. Ben Adams has shown some interest there. Um, Peter Riggs, obviously, on the Senate side. So
Just not
there's only a few that really, in my opinion, that have really dug in so far. I mean,
not
there's
not 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 enough of you.
yeah,
So will you form a Bitcoin caucus?
maybe we should do that. Who could-
That sounds like something that could happen. And I guess, by the way, but for clarity purposes, you're a fan of not only Bitcoin but also what's commonly referred to in the industry as S coins. You're okay. You like those as well. Some people don't.
I mean, I don't love that, but I love the opportunity that comes with it. I think, someone should be able to create a coin for whatever they want. And if there's a use case for it and they can create value, whatever, I mean, I think that's great. I do think most of those coins out there have followed and traced in value. I mean, you can just see it, right? I mean, it's traced what Bitcoin's done, and so they sort of just follow that at a different rate, give or take, and they take off for different reasons. But um, the beauty of Bitcoin is all the natural things that, well, not natural, they were intentional, built into it. Fixed supply, just completely distributed, and a lot of them have copied that, right? And whatever, but I think things like Ethereum and Solana and those others, are used for different purposes. But as far as stores, and when I first, let me just say it this way, and this maybe sounds a little bit confusing, but I think it'll make sense. When I first started paying attention to Bitcoin, and it was probably back in 2011 or 12. I mean, pretty early on. Um, I was like, this is not really ever going to be replacement to the dollar, is it? Like, and then I was like, is this really going to work as a currency? And then, a few years ago, that tide started to shift for me, where I thought, I'm okay with it if it's used for a currency, but the beautiful thing of it is really as a store of value. Like I don't want to spend a Bitcoin. Like I think it's a place to store, invest in, because it's going to just keep increasing. So it'd kind of be dumb to spend it if you really believe in it. Um, so I think other ones can be maybe even better used as currencies in particular, but for me, it goes back to maybe why you would want to put Bitcoin on a balance sheet, and companies are, and state treasurers maybe will start doing that. It's because it's a beautiful store of value and protection of investment.
Do you believe in Ethereum or Solana?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, those ones are sort of used as the gas tax to conduct transactions online for the most part. So that I think the question is the cost effective, and I think that's where Solana sort of maybe come on to, in
Well,
the
yeah,
race
because
against Ethereum.
you'd
But
pay
yeah,
you'd pay $300 for a transaction on Ethereum.
right, exactly.
I mean, and then you had the people who love Ethereum say, well, that just guarantees that it's a protected system. And you're like, okay, that's
Yeah,
I have $100 in cryptocurrency on a wallet and I can't move because it's $300 in fees.
right,
I mean, I can move it, but it doesn't do me any good.
right.
But people they are in two camps, and that makes it even more confusing. Where you have Bitcoin and then you have Ethereum et al. And if it's not complicated enough, and there's also 12,000 more coins out there, with people who are trying to make public policy when they can barely operate email sometimes.
Right.
It's challenging. Well,
Right.
I'm glad you're working on it. It is an important issue, and I'm very passionate about it too, as I do think it makes a big difference in not only people's lives but also in protecting the taxpayer from runaway inflation.
Yeah, and I think if the trend goes the way it's going, it's going to just keep being more and more relevant. But more and more businesses and more individuals are going to be looking for ways to protect their net worth and to transact business, and it very well may be Bitcoin or another one, but Bitcoin's the clear leader right now.
Bitcoin's the queen. All right. Well, hey, Representative Manwaring, thank you for being on the program. Really appreciate it. Interesting discussion, and look to have you back sometime. And sorry couldn't be there in person, but it was good to chat with you.
Yeah, it was good to be here with you. Have a good time down in Florida.
I will do. I look forward to seeing everybody back soon. Well, that's the program. I want to thank everybody for watching, and we'll see you all again next Tuesday. Bye bye.